Gentlemen, welcome to our third lecture this year. It's my pleasure to introduce President Pearson as our leadership lecture speaker. President Pearson arrived at Carson in July 2013 after 14 years at Kent Hill School in Maine, where he was in sequence a history teacher, department chair, dean of academics, and assistant headmaster. His education includes a Bachelor of Science in Economics degree from Aberystwyth University in International Politics and Strategic Studies, a Master of Philosophy degree from Cambridge University in Naval Strategy, a Master of Philosophy degree from Aberdeen University in British Counterinsurgency Doctrine, and a Master of Education degree in History from Cheltenham University. Mr. Pearson also graduated from the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst and the British Army Staff College. He was commissioned an infantry officer and served as a platoon commander, company commander, battalion intelligence officer, brigade operations officer, and overseas training officer for both the Italian Alpini Regiment and the Jordanian Army. Qualified as a mountain and Arctic warfare instructor, Mr. Pearson's military career took him from the Arctic tundra to the deserts of the Middle East in a succession of tours of duty on counter-terrorist and counterinsurgency and United Nations active service operations. His topic today is British Army leadership. Gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Pearson.
Thank you all for coming today. I know you had little choice in the matter, but hopefully you'll learn a little bit. Introduction. He has been practicing his pronunciation of Aberystwyth and Cheltenham, but he got those spot on, so well done. I'm going to talk a little bit about British Army leadership. That's my background. I've worked with the Air Force, I've worked with the Navy, but I am going to focus on Army leadership. Because bottom line, we deal with people first and foremost. And at the end of the day, our task as an infantry officer is to close with the enemy and destroy them with bullet, bayonet, grenade, and if necessary, bare hands. The Navy have their platforms and they're often long distance. The Air Force drops things from a great height, but the Army and the infantry do it face to face. So it's a different kind of leadership. And I want you to think about it as I talk about some of the qualities an officer in the Army, or an NCO in the Army, or a private soldier in the Army must exhibit on a day-to-day basis. Because you do not know when your platoon commander, your company commander, your section commander is going to bite the dirt, and you have to take over. And that's just the bottom line. And the British Army has been in active operations for its entire history. From 1900 to 2000, there was only 1 year when a British soldier was not killed on active service. And since 9/11, every single year, you've seen the British Army operations in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in other places around the world. So my focus is Army leadership, not leadership generalised. Effective leadership in the British Army is characterised by the projection of personality and purpose onto people and situations in order to prevail in the most demanding circumstances. For this to be moral, just and acceptable, it has to be underpinned by moral values, which, to be truly authentic, must be practiced by all ranks. The projection of personality and purpose onto everyone around you. Characteristic of army leadership in Britain. Now you'll probably see I've dug out the photograph album and put some pictures up as we go through, and I am going to be rather interactive on this presentation and ask you to get involved. As an officer, we are trained at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. The very best NCOs in the British Army are posted to the Academy to help the young officers understand how the Army works, how the regimental system works, whether you're engineers, infantry, armour, air corps, and the adjutant always rides a white charger around the Academy grounds. The cannon, you can see, just to the right of the corps, were captured at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815 from Napoleon. It's an historic building. You name a famous personality in Britain, from David Niven to Winston Churchill to Prince Harry to Prince William, they went to the Academy. At the end of the graduation ceremony, the Sovereign's Parade, the adjutant will ride his horse up the steps into Old College and into the Indian Army Museum. A lot of tradition, a lot of history. When you're there for a year training to be a young officer, it flows through you. You can't escape it. It's very much like the history of Carson Long. You become part of a family. Mr. Bryce, tell me what sort of themes define leadership. What would you say? What themes, what big, on the macro scale, define leadership for you? When you look at leaders,
being confident.
Confident.
Yes.
Anything else?
Set an example.
Set an example. Mr. Romberger, what would you say?
Strength.
Strength. What sort of strength?
Just like having personal courage.
Personal courage. Stop. Good. And remember, speak up, be confident. Mr. York, what do you think?
Bravery.
Bravery. Mr. Funderton, what do you think?
Help others in their need.
Help others. Mr. Charles, what do you think about leadership?
Respect.
Respect. These are all good words. It seems to me that you're picking up some of the ethos of leadership. The overarching themes of leadership in the British Army, from a macro to a micro level: responsibility. If you're a leader, you are responsible for absolutely everything that occurs, day in, day out. Even when you delegate a task, or when something takes place that is not your fault, who's to blame? Who takes the blame?
Leader.
The leader. Responsibility for everything. The decisions and actions of leaders resonate through their behaviours. They set the climate and the moral framework of their organisation. Great leaders carry this responsibility lightly. They do not let their burden overwhelm or impact them. Another key feature of leadership is example. What do I mean by example, Mr. Malley?
Helping others.
Possibly. Anybody else? Example. Mr. Loader.
By setting the example, showing how so.
By setting the example, showing. There is a very strong human tendency to adopt the characteristics and behaviours of those around us. You will copy each other. You will copy good behaviour, just like you will copy bad behaviour. I prefer the former. This is example. It happens subconsciously and potentially against our will. Army leaders are role models. Their behaviour and values will be judged and assimilated by those they lead. Hence, the living core values at all times being important and providing moral leadership is indispensable. This is what we're inculcated in at the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. Here's a straightforward one: excellence. Mr. Cromer, what do you understand by that?
Doing really good.
Doing really good. I like it. What else? Anybody? Excellence. Mr. Romberger.
Taking pride in what you believe.
Taking pride in what you believe. What's an army career like? Is it pretty easy? Simple? Difficult? Challenging? Well, it varies from day to day, but the bottom line is it's dynamic, it's complex, it's often adversarial, and the real bottom line is the lives of the men in your command depend on the decisions that you take. So army leaders must be excellent. And it's self-apparent to anybody in a contact situation, but it's also important in training, in recruitment, and in planning. As an army leader, you need to pursue excellence ruthlessly. Development. This is part of what you need to do on a day-to-day basis. What do you understand by development? Mr. Johnson, what do you understand by development?
If the terrain's different, you have to adapt.
Adapt, yes.
To grow.
To grow. You need to be better today than you were yesterday, and tomorrow you need to be better still. You cannot be static. You need to grow because the world is changing. And you're never quite as good as you think you are. So you need to study yourself. And it's a continual process. It requires humility and willingness to recognize mistakes. If you make a mistake, what do? You learn from it. And this is the key to leadership. Don't do it again. We all make mistakes, but learn from it. Be innovative. You've got to create team growth by establishing an open environment that challenges the status quo. Challenges the status quo. If we do the same thing that we always did, and you're an army officer, your enemies are going to outthink you. In World War I, the predominant characteristic of warfare was static, trench warfare. The French learned the lesson of World War I and built a concrete line of trenches. They called it the Maginot Line. The Germans learned from their encounter with the British 4th Army at Amiens in 1918, where they faced an integrated all-armed combat group, radio, motorised infantry, armour, aircraft, connected together by radio, and learned. In 1940, the German divisions went around the French trench, the Maginot Line, straight to the Channel ports, and France fell in a few weeks. So, always grow, learn, study, look at mistakes. And one of the key features of leadership is judgment. Judgment is an appraisal of all decisions. Look at what's happening and make good choices. At times, judgment is the application of intuition, your gut feeling. At others, it's deduction, born of analysis and experience. And it's often including empathy, compassion, and if necessary, you have to be ruthless for the good of the team. Now, as an army, we have three ways that we look at the context of fighting power. Very simple. The most important thing in war is the human being, man. But you've got to have a physical component. Your equipment, your training, your sustainability. You've got to have a moral component, your ethical foundations. You've got to have a conceptual component, which is your doctrine, your plans, your thinking, your values. You can apply that to Carson Long. The physical component of what you're doing every day, the moral component about how you behave. Like now, you should be sat up with your head back because we've asked you to do that, and that's just self-discipline. And, of course, the conceptual component as to what we're trying to do here. If those are the responsibilities, the themes of leadership, what are the core values of leadership? I think one of the most important is moral and physical courage. Anybody give me an example of physical courage? Yes, sir.
Taking a bullet for someone taking a bullet.
Okay, we have an example here, don't we? Can you tell me what it is? Of a former cadet in this academy who stood in front of his classmates at Virginia Tech. Yes. Yes, when the gunman burst into that classroom at Virginia Tech, one of our graduates stood in front of his classmates to protect them. That is physical courage. But there's also a different type of courage, moral courage. What is that about? That's a little bit difficult. What is moral courage? Yes?
Standing up for something that's right.
Yes, standing up for something that's right. Your personal principles based on the climate of the organisation that you are within. That's often hard because you have peer pressure around you. It might be that I don't want to be seen to be that person that is trying to do the right thing because everybody else isn't. But right there, in that instance, will determine whether or not you're an effective leader or not. So, discipline is also important. You must set the tone and the discipline through example, and you must engender pride and high standards in order for your team to function. As a leader, the army has respect for others. In Iraq, in Afghanistan, when working with foreign nationals, you have to respect the civil population, yes? In order for them to believe in the values that you stand for. If you see others doing something wrong, you have to step in. Again, back to moral courage. You want to treat people how you want to be treated yourself. Integrity. Another army core value. It sounds like something we know. In fact, there it is. An American army core value. Integrity. It's universal. Mr. Meinhold, what is integrity? Sorry? Could anybody tell me what integrity is? Mr. Charles?
Doing the right thing when no one's watching.
You don't have to have a crowd to do the right thing. There are enormous examples of only doing the right thing if someone's watching you. Do the right thing always, whether or not you have an audience. Being straight. The British Army expects all soldiers to be true to themselves, to be honest, to face up to reality, to stand up for what is right, to uphold moral and ethical values in any situation. This is the case even when showing integrity may disadvantage your career or even risk life. Challenge people who are doing it wrong. Careers are irrelevant. Integrity is everything. If people know a leader is open, honest, deals with people fairly, is not influenced by discrimination or bias, it will engender a culture of openness where errors are aired early, allowing rapid correction. Leaders with integrity are honest with themselves about their own performance. They show subordinates that they are prepared to own up to their own shortcomings. Loyalty. Faithful representation of another's interests, even above your own, constitutes loyalty. If you are loyal to an organisation, to each other, you can transform it from a disparate individualized collection of people into a powerful force and team that is cohesive and can do more than is expected of them. You are stronger together and always will be than you are on your own. And that's just a fact of life. Selfless commitment. As a leader, you put others before yourself. It's a notion of service. And in the army, you sign an oath of allegiance. In my case, my oath of allegiance was to the monarchy, the Queen. It's not to government, it's not to Parliament, it's to the head of state. And it's at the heart of army leadership. This is an example of courage. Corporal Budd, Victoria Cross. That painting is hanging up in the sergeant's mess of the 2nd Battalion Parachute Regiment. Corporal Brian Budd, Victoria Cross, assaulted an insurgent position to enable the recovery of wounded comrades. He charged forward while others pulled out the wounded paras. He was killed in the action. He was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross. He left behind his wife, Lorna, daughter, Isabella, and they were expecting their second child in just a few months. Courage, loyalty, commitment. He did not think of himself. He thanked his team, and he moved forward. And they were able to extract the wounded soldiers because of his personal bravery. That's him shortly before the action. If we look at history, there's all sorts of examples of leadership. At every point, people are afraid in battle. At times I was afraid, I made no bones about it, particularly when talking to the soldiers after the event. Because there is no shame in it. The shame lies in not being able to conquer it. You must be able to conquer your own fear. A squadron leader in Afghanistan. Sun Tzu, Chinese philosopher. Leadership is a matter of intelligence, trustworthiness, humaneness, courage, and discipline. If you have all of that, you can be a leader. Individually, those component parts aren't enough. Intelligence, trustworthiness, humaneness, courage, and discipline. These are qualities that are enduring. And you see a picture of Major Matt Collins, Irish Guards, with the commander of the Afghan National Army Battalion. Major Collins was killed shortly thereafter while advising the Afghan National Army. Again, putting service before self. So the qualities of an army leader, we're going from the top to the bottom now. We're talking about individual qualities. As I list these, think if you have them. Self-aware. You understand how you yourself operate. You are professionally competent. What does professionally competent mean? Mr. Montgomery, you're on the battalion staff. What does professionally competent mean?
Knowing your job.
Knowing your job. Absolutely right. If you have a leader who's ineffective because they do not know what to do or the tools that they're using, how much confidence are you going to have in them?
None, sir.
None. No, you've got to be professionally competent. Because in military situations, and again I'm talking about army leadership, the consequences of mediocre performance can be catastrophic, and the relentless pursuit of excellence starts with a detailed knowledge of the profession, which means you need to study. You need to study history, you need to study your men, you need to study examples, and you need to study those in command above you to see how they do it. You also need to be ethical decision makers. How many of you have seen the movie Lone Survivor? Some of you are too young to have seen that movie, so I'm surprised. However, who would like to tell me the key point in that movie that is based on the operation of the Naval SEAL unit in Afghanistan? Go.
The SEALs were on a recon mission and were acted upon by a group of Afghan civilians, and they had to decide whether to climb the trees, execute them, or let them go. So they decided to let them go, which optimized the mission.
Who decided to let them go?
The leader.
Thank you. The leader said, you will go. There was no discussion, there was no debate. The army is not a democracy. We protect democracy, we do not practice it. And in a command situation, the leader makes that decision. There was solicitation of input first of all. He made an ethical decision. One man came out of that 5-day engagement. Marcus Luttrell, who then wrote the book which became a Hollywood movie. He went back to serve in Afghanistan for a second tour, but his injuries, his back injuries, necessitated his retirement from service. But that was an ethical decision. They could have shot those Afghan goat herders on the side of the mountain and left them. What would have happened? Anybody? Mr. Davis.
Maybe they could have heard because they were close to a town, or it was just like the wrong thing to do.
It was the wrong thing to do. In my experiences, it will come to public light.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It would have destroyed the American reputation in Afghanistan. You have to be seen to be morally correct in your actions, yes? You can't act that way, even at the price of your own lives. So, physically fit. Here's something that I think is also very important. Where do you lead from, Mr. Eastep? Yes, you lead from the front. You do not ask anybody to do anything you cannot do yourself or have not done. You need to be at the front. As you get into a combat situation, you cannot be thinking, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I've got too much weight, these battery packs are heavy, I've got too much ammunition, and this GPMG machine gun weighs a ton. You then have to go into overdrive. You cannot be at par in terms of physical fitness with your men. You need to be above that because you've got to be thinking, moving, planning, and inspiring. Physical fitness is key in military leadership. Some of you have difficulty keeping your eyes open. I suggest you get fitter, stronger, work harder, because it's discipline. That's what it's all about. Fitness is key in leadership. There are also, I'm afraid to say, bad examples of leadership. Here's one. This is from a staff officer in Iraq in 2007. Arrogant styles of leadership will stifle initiative and cause alienation. One sensed a slight intellectual bully with a reputation for being clever. He spent much of his time delving into the workings of his staff and cramping their imagination. He either did not trust his staff or felt his judgment was so far ahead of theirs that he had to constantly interfere. He was insanely hungry for details, and the whole system spent more of its time answering his endless requests rather than sorting out problems for those below them. He worked ridiculously long hours, unnecessarily so. Everyone became tired. A few resigned. I don't think he had any other life and certainly had no other interests. He rarely praised and his visits were dreaded. Few felt able to challenge him, and quite quickly his headquarters became a byword for suffering. Who would like to work for someone like that in a brigade headquarters? Certainly not myself. Empathy is important. Compassion is important. Another example related to training. Being soft. Mr. McGeegan, do you think we should be soft? No. This is a military example from Northern Ireland. We had a company commander who thought he was doing his best for our welfare by ameliorating the hardships of austere training in Kenya. He shortened marches and then arranged fizzy drinks at the end of them. He then stood the company down midway through the exercise because he thought we might like a break while others continued to conduct valuable training. But when we got to Northern Ireland, I realised that his kindnesses had failed us. We were not properly prepared for the rigours of conflict, the men were soft because the company commander did not train them properly. Anybody recognize those people? Anybody? Yes!
That's the Queen, sir.
It's the Queen! Which one? Oh, the red hat. Well spotted. Okay. Who's the other guy? No. Prince William. You may have heard about him, yes? He's got a wife called Kate Middleton, yes? They had a big ceremony at an abbey recently, got some children. He's going to be King of England one day. The Sovereign's Parade at Sandhurst is the Sovereign's Parade. The Queen is the representative that commissions officers in the British Army, including her grandson. Both, in fact, are officers in the Army, and her other son, Harry, flies Apache gunships in Afghanistan. You share the same risk. Prince Edward, her son, flew helicopters in the Falklands War. His helicopter was an Exocet missile decoy during the war. It didn't matter that he was the prince. You put yourself in uniform, you are with everybody else, you share the same risks. So it's good to see the royal family taking part in this. What do leaders do? And this is probably the keynote of the entire presentation. A leader needs to provide vision, support, and challenge. Vision is a leader's responsibility to provide a vision of shared goals so that the team is inspired, has direction, and pulls together. Support is only possible to inspire extraordinary actions when there is mutual knowledge and trust within the team. And challenge, you know about challenge, you will only reach your full potential in anything if you are pushed beyond the limits that you think are possible. Too many of you, and I've seen it myself, give up because it's hard. That's not the answer. What is our motto here?
Instead of taking the harder right, instead of the easier right, taking the harder right.
Close, but back to front. Who would like to have another go? Yes.
Choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong.
The harder right rather than the easier wrong. Choose the harder right. It's hard because it's important. And the easy decisions are easy because of their nature. Leaders need to take tough, hard decisions. They need to understand and think. They need to know what's going on around them. They need to be able to essentially grasp situations in a heartbeat. They need to establish and evaluate these situations because in a combat environment, they change every few seconds. 1 minute, everyone's standing up. The next, you've got 3 dead men around you. What are you going to do? Where's the fire coming from? How many enemy? What supporting arms have you got on call? Oh dear, one of them's your radio man. So you have to be able to understand and think, and sometimes just instinct takes over. Combat, I can tell you personally, is the preserve of chaos. The moment it happens, the moment the bullet goes past your head, everything changes. Everything that you've planned basically stops. And you have to be able to think on your feet to be able to innovate. You need to be creative. One of our skills that we're trying to inculcate in you in our classes is creativity. And that is key. Because leaders must interpret, innovate, and when necessary, improvise. The American Army called the British Army the borrowers in Iraq, because we kept borrowing all their equipment. Because the government hadn't provided us what we really needed. But we didn't stop doing our job, we improvised, we adapted, and we overcame. And of course, you've got to perform every single day. And you've got to be able to communicate in any form, including bad news. How would you, if you were a leader, convey bad news? Mr. Remain. Mr. Aponte. Sorry? You're a leader. You've got some bad news to share with someone. Mr. Coughlin.
You have to report all the people that died to their families.
How?
Letter and name.
Just say with like humility and humbleness.
Yes? Does bad news get any better with age? No, it doesn't, does it? So you can do it promptly, and wherever possible you look someone in the eye and you do it face to face. Yes? It's not an email. Some of the most powerful letters coming out of Afghanistan and Iraq today are from young platoon commanders in their early 20s writing to parents of their men who've been killed in combat. And they are poignant, they are incredibly powerful, and they help with the healing process. Leaders also need to build teams, because you are better together than you are alone. I'll give you a few examples of what good teams do and what bad teams do. And then I'm going to show you a video, and I'm going to ask you to think about what I said. If you're in a bad team, you're going to conceal your weakness and mistakes from each other. If you're in a good team, you're going to admit weaknesses and mistakes. If you're in a bad team, you're not going to provide constructive feedback. If you're in a good team, you're going to ask for help. If you're in a bad team, you're going to hesitate to offer help. If you're in a good team, you're going to have questions and you're going to have input into the decision-making process. If you're in a bad team, you're going to jump to conclusions about each other. You're going to have attitudes about each other without thinking. If you're in a good team, you're not going to have negative conclusions. You're actually going to give people the benefit of the doubt. You're going to fail to recognise and tap into each other's skills and experiences. Or you are going to help and give assistance and feedback. You're going to waste time and energy trying to manage people's effects and behaviour. Or you're going to use people and their skills to their full potential. If you're in a bad team, you're going to hold grudges. If you're in a good team, you're going to focus your time and energy on important issues and not politics. And if you're in a bad team, you're not going to want to go to meetings. And if you're in a good team, you're going to want to go to meetings. And here is a quote from a troop leader in Afghanistan, talking about teamwork. I can think of a few patrols where we were not accompanied by attached arms, be it a high assurance search team, dog handler, medic, fire support team, or forward air controller. It was critical to make them feel part of the team. They would join me for all planning and order sessions. I would introduce them to the troop and explain the skills they brought and how they were a significant asset. This was soon justified by their contribution on patrol, and equally as rapidly realised by the men. The troop quickly welcomed them, and it was warming to see them all playing poker in the tent at night, laughing raucously and joshing with each other as if they'd known them for years. Ironically, their individual identities, be they cavalryman, engineer or airman, generated a banter that enriched and strengthened the team as a whole. Teamwork. Now,
trouble started in the northern valleys.
And see if you can pick out the leadership values. I'm going to ask you.
Groups of the drug lords, insurgents and tribesmen went on the offensive.
These attacks in Nauzad, Musikara and Sangin were challenging our very authority and reason for being there.
The Paras started to fight back, but that exposed the reality that Butler faced competing missions, fighting the insurgents versus bolstering the Afghan government through good deeds. By mid-June, the crisis had focused at a place where opium trading, insurgency, and hatred of outsiders came together in their most violent form. The Northern District, Sangin. Tribesmen killed dozens of the district governor's supporters and the police. And so Helmand's governor demanded the British do something.
Their mission was to maintain security in Helmand. If they were not deploying their troops to those districts to the north, we may have lost those districts.
Both he and President Carson said, if you're not prepared to fight, and if you're not prepared to protect our flag and protect our people, why are you here?
The British now faced a critical decision. Keeping the Afghan government flag flying meant defending Sangin with British troops.
Everyone was involved, from me to my brigade commander to especially the Afghan governor at the time, and certainly the UK government.
Implementing the decision to act rested with Colonel Tootle.
Although we never really had the resources to do it in the way that I would have wanted to, then the logic was sound, and we'd been asked to do something.
After 20 minutes of deliberation, he agreed to do it.
Yes, it was a stretch, yes, it was a risk, but hey, we're paratroopers, we're British soldiers, that's what we do, and that's exactly what we did.
They were equipped only for a brief mission north.
Our kit was packed for exactly that, 3 to 4 days. Really minimal stuff.
As soon as they arrived, they tried to fortify the local government HQ, or district centre.
We were filling cardboard boxes with rubble and building up defences, just basically out of anything you could.
Filling up 24-hour ration boxes, we just made do with what was there, which wasn't a lot.
It started off maybe a couple of times a day, and then it sort of increased to, 7, 8 times a day, into the nights as well.
It was just constant contacts of 3, 4, 5 times a day. They were trying to hit us either by small arms, rockets or mortars. They did a couple of times when they actually tried to storm the place.
They had the idea they were going to try and take the camp, which was never going to happen.
It was just pretty much a shootout.
So yeah, they learned a harsh lesson that night. Well, we're meeting force for force, so if they come at us with small arms, rockets, whatever, we'll meet them with that. But we're better.
Fired a rocket killing a couple of guys from the signals unit and an Afghani interpreter. These were the first casualties. It sort of hit home to everyone. It isn't a joke, this is real.
They were cut off in the Sangin district centre.
There's a building with a prominent double door, red door. Yeah. To the left of that, we've got an open doorway. Yeah, little single doorway open there.
The deal was that we would go there for 96 hours. We actually spent a total of 95 days there, fighting every day.
Being besieged in...
Okay, so what do you think? Any examples of leadership? Yes, sir. Courage. What else? Respect to each other? Yeah. Teamwork. Teamwork. What else? Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis. Sorry? Okay, how were the commanders thinking? Did they act decisively?
Yeah. No, they got, the people in charge thought about Pearson, they made good decisions.
And they were outnumbered, under-equipped, but they still acted, didn't they? Because they were there to protect the Afghan government. The Afghan government officials were being assassinated, so they moved in. They went in for 4 days, they were there for 90 plus days, fighting every day. So decisive action. That's happening every day on the ground in army leadership situations. Some of you have aspirations, I know, to be in the military, whether it's the Coast Guard, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, or the Army. These are very familiar situations. This is, I think, exemplary. The squadron leader called for me on the radio. I doubled back to where I thought his position was. On my way there, I met the squadron sergeant major, who grabbed me. Our conversation went like this: "Sir, the squadron leader is after you." "I know, I'm going to find him." "You're going the wrong way, sir." "But that means he's ahead of me." "He's the squadron leader, sir. The clue is in the title." From that moment on, I realised what was required of me. If you lead from the front. Pure and simple. You can't do it on your own. You can never do it on your own. And you've got to have a good staff. A leader without a good staff is essentially hamstrung. And a successful staff ultimately is going to create the esprit de corps necessary to function. And you have to encourage free thinking. So you'll see in history that often leaders will pick their alter ego in order to balance their own personality. Napoleon had Berthier, Blucher, Scharnhorst, Rommel, Gauss, Montgomery de Gunnar, and Churchill with Alanbrooke. Churchill was impetuous, Alanbrooke was more cool-headed, more thoughtful. They balanced each other, and that's the key to a staff. The other thing is, as I say, everything's changing in this world. I mean, who would have thought we had mobile iPads just a few years ago? When I was at college, I wrote everything. I didn't get a computer until Army Staff College, when they required us to have a computer. I didn't even know how to switch it on. I'd never seen one before. It was incredible, and we had to learn how to use them. I do not know what sort of equipment and technology you're going to be using in the future, but I know it's going to be exciting, it's going to be revolutionary, and it's going to change the way people lead and operate. So when you change, leaders have to drive the change. They have to drive it, not adapt to it. Otherwise you can get a vacuum, you can't let rumour control anything, and it's your personal example that is going to be key. And John F. Kennedy, I think, is absolutely spot on. For time and the world do not stand still. Change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past and the present are certain to miss the future. You can rest on your laurels for about 2 seconds, and then you've got to do something, and do it again and again and again. And that's what we're doing here. We are moving forward, we are looking forward, and I'm relying on all of you to help the school achieve its objectives. So change leadership is also very, very important. I'm going to just miss that, but because time is getting on. Study. Field Marshal Slim, Viscount Slim. Slim is one of probably the greatest military leaders, I think, in history. How many of you have heard of him? Colonel Morgan. Who's Field Marshal Slim?
Commander of the Far East Indian area during World War II.
Absolutely. Commander of the 14th Army. He took over an army that had been defeated. It had been kicked out of Singapore, where the British lost 130,000 men. The Japanese had attacked with 60,000 men. They were incompetently led by General Percival. The army was demoralised. It was on its last legs. He had little equipment, little logistics. He arrived, and by force of personality, General Slim, as he was then, converted the 14th Army into probably the finest field army the British have ever fielded, and then drove the Japanese all the way from India back to Vietnam. And they never suffered a defeat once he took over command. And his mantra is study. And that's my top tip for today for you to study. Always study. So I'm just going to finish there with a few more pictures from the album, and you can think about what I've said. Leadership is not easy, but it's fun, and those who aspire to it are going to change the world. So I've talked to you a little bit today about British Army leadership. We are not training you to be combat soldiers here. You know that. That's what recruit training is for. We are trying to develop in you your leadership potential. So some of the themes, some of the values, the core values, some of the individual responsibilities and qualities of leadership that I've shared with you today, hopefully will resonate. I look around here, and as I said last week, are there men or honour winners in this audience? I look around here and I see enormous potential. I also see lots to do. Some of you are having trouble just keeping your eyes open. That's all about personal discipline for me. You either can or you can't. Yes? It's also a choice that you make. If you're a leader, you need to model the behaviour. But never do it on your own. Get people to help you. Some of you 6th graders at the moment, and I'm looking at you, 7th graders, you're going to be our future leaders. Who are you looking at today to inspire you, to model yourself after? And I bet it's some of the 11th and 12th graders. Some of you do want your careers. You will have a head start because of the values that we're talking about, experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Colonel Butler is absolutely right. Leadership does not stop when you leave the JROTC building. You have opportunities every single day, evening, in every single aspect of operations here to be a leader. You also have the ability to make choices, good choices and bad choices. I want to see good choices. Good things happen to good people. Thank you very much.